Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so you know how you kind of go along in life expecting no more or less than what you already know from certain things? Like for instance, light novels. Because whether right or wrong, you know there are stereotypes. You know there's a certain style. You know there's a known level of what to expect. Then something comes along and flips all of those perceptions right onto their head. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where I find myself in regards to today's review for J Novel Club's The Apothecary Diaries Volume 1, written by Natsu Hyuuga, illustrations are by Touko Shino, and translated by Kevin Steinbach. And geez, I could use a reputable apothecary myself. I have a bit of a croaky throat. But let's just picture it. In a time that is not quite pinned down, in a place that is not quite imperialist China. In the exquisitely described rear palace, we find a reserved young servant girl named Maomao. Once an independent young woman working as an apothecary, Maomao was foraging for ingredients when she was kidnapped by bandits and sold into imperial servitude, as you are. Such is the lot of many young women throughout the land. But life isn't all bad. Maomao does earn a wage as she spends her days as a laundress, and while in cramped quarters, she still has a roof over her head and never goes hungry. She is very wary, though, to hide her skills and literacy, as Maomao knows it will make her an even more valuable asset. And really, she just wants to serve out her conscription and get back home to her father and the life she knew. Until one fateful day, Maomao's insatiable curiosity is piqued upon hearing the gossip about the emperor's favorite consorts and their babies. Both women and the babies are desperately ill and their lives are feared for. So quick of wit in mind, Maomao has her suspicions as to what may be causing the illness and takes it upon herself to secret notes to the two consorts, urging them to please take heed. Of course, this does not go unnoticed, and despite all of Maomao's attempts to remain mostly anonymous, the ethereally beautiful head eunuch Jinshi, who is as equally bright as Maomao, recognizes her for her skills. Jinshi decides to employ Maomao as a lady-in-waiting to the favored noble consort of the Jade Palace, Lady Gyokyo, as her food taster, in fact. Suddenly, Maomao is reluctantly thrust into the very center of the rear palace intrigues and uses her trade and intellect to solve puzzles and save lives and test for poisons. Now, I know I started off by mentioning that the Apothecary Diaries managed to challenge my expectations for light novels. How has it done that, you may ask? Well, it's in the language and in the prose. It's the descriptions. It's the overall richness of the world and characters that inhabit it. And although my first-hand experience of light novels is still relatively on the newbie level, and although The Apothecary Diaries is being marketed as a light novel, I would argue that it reads very much like a dramatic period fiction novel. There are passages and imagery that take me right back to such books as The Ghost Bride by Yang Zichu, or Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden, or even the more modern tale, though no less rich, The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. In The Apothecary Diaries, the use of elaborate descriptions and lush metaphors brings the ancient and yet relatable world to vibrant life. Passages such as, "She had discovered she had known as much about the outside world as a frog who had spent its life in a well," which is found on the 8th page into the story, signals to the reader that they can expect a much more in-depth journey than the standard light novel fare. Not only is the passage an apt metaphor for Maomao and her small experience of the world, or even the caged consorts, or the microcosm of life in the imperial rear palace, but it also brings to mind Socrates' cave wall, where lives are bound to forever watch the only reality they know of, the flickering shadows. You may be thinking that for all the reasons I loved this book, you may not enjoy it as much, because I understand it is a rarity among light novels to have this level of writing. I would nevertheless urge you to give The Apothecary Diaries a go. There are still oodles of light novel tropes that you'll really enjoy. We have a heavenly Bishonen in Jinshi, whom all the women of the palace swoon for, and probably some of the men, except for, of course, Maomao. We have ghostly sightings and hauntings which send thrills and rumors through the citizens of the rear palace, except for Maomao. We have the creation of aphrodisiacs that send women and men alike all aflutter, except for Maomao. We have the forbidden secret teachings of titty fucking. Actually, that one is thanks to Maomao and her upbringing in the red light district. There are disguises and manslaughter and courtesans and bullying and plots and parties and flirting and drinking and food and even a poison fetish in a rhododendron tree. At first blush, it may seem that Maomao is as solid as a rock. That she starts off as a strong, smart, and silent woman who ends the book in much the same way. And she is. But also there are changes, small enough that could be easily glossed over, but they're there. The willingness to help others despite her own well-being could be argued that it's due to her curiosity, but I think I'd rather believe that it's because she's growing accustomed to life in the rear palace. That very slowly the people and place are wearing down her thick street-smart armor that has always helped her to keep people more or less at bay. It's like the old analogy of the bird brushing the mountain with its wing once every 100 years. Slowly, we're starting to see Maomao's soft spots, and even she herself begins to notice her shift in thoughts and feelings towards certain characters and ideas. Even if she isn't fully sure of them herself, the reader definitely gets a sense that the strictly straightforward girl is beginning to feel new to her feels. I think it's also safe to argue that not only is Maomao slowly changing, but so is the community around her. No, not so much in grandiose ways like she's going to single-handedly abolish classism, more like just how as slowly Maomao herself is opening up and changing, so are other characters as well. That their ideas of conventional beauty, knowledge, and worldviews are ever so slightly shifting, and they can see beyond their own narrow fields of vision. That by the end of the book, it's not so inconceivable that a homely waif of a girl could be entrusted with extremely sensitive subjects such as palace politics and intrigues, and not just relegated away to the laundry duty. And speaking of palace intrigues, there are plenty. Many of which hint at a greater mystery that is slowly being revealed via its many moving parts. There are a few popular ideas of what this may be and how it may change some of the major palace players, but nothing is revealed by the end of the first volume, and we can only hope that it is further teased or fleshed out in future books. The one thing I found myself saying over and over again to myself and to Justus was what I would be extremely pissed off if somewhere down the line the author tried to insist on making this an isekai title. Yay gods! I ranted on the idea one morning. I mean, I could see how some people would think it in all of the knowledge that Maomao possesses, but anyone who has any history under their belt would also know that much of Maomao's knowledge was actually discovered and known throughout different periods of Chinese history. Not all at the same time or even in overlapping periods, but it definitely can be found in historical records. Yes, I know it's not explicitly stated as being China, but there is enough commonality that we can assume it is. But I swore, boy howdy did I swear, that if it ever turned out to be an isekai situation, I would absolutely tear down every single thing about this book, because there is absolutely no reason under the sun for it to be an isekai, nor is there any reason that it needs to be one. There is far too much of this already out there, and you don't want to ruin a good story with it. Period. Another popular theory seems to be that perhaps Maomao is more than the simple adopted daughter of the old apothecary. There are subtle hints that this could be true and definite paths that the author has left open for this possibility to come to fruition, but nothing is confirmed as of yet, and it remains in the shrouded realm of fan theory. One thing about the Apothecary Diaries which I discovered and am most definitely not a fan of is something that the story itself is not guilty of. It's the formatting. First of all, this is the first digital title, light novel title, that I have ever read. And that said, I find myself surprised that I think I may actually be a fan of digital over print, mostly due to expense and space restrictions of print over digital. I mean, nothing will ever replace the smell and the feel of a paper book. But geez, digital, oh wow, there are so many more options. And how big of a library can you squeeze into such a tiny little space? I mean, it is pretty fantastic. And with the e-ink reader that I have, it's actually easier on my eyes than a traditional print book. What dismayed me was that I completely missed the added illustrations. Of course they aren't in color, which doesn't bother me. In fact, I think illustrations in light novels aren't necessary at all, and I know that's probably not a popular belief, but that's coming from me, who is new to light novels, and I'm used to the wider world of fiction where illustrations aren't a thing. So no, what really bothered me was the fact that the illustrations are put at the end of the book rather than the beginning, and that I completely missed them. I finished the story and closed the book. It wasn't until sometime later when I went to prepare this review that I found out I had missed them. At first I was confused, and then I was angry, and I didn't understand why I was angry. Recently, Hyuuga on the Discord server had been asking people what they preferred in terms of inserts in light novels, and she has since written an article about it. I believe that's at eln.com. And that helped me figure out what made me so mad. And I understand the thinking publishers have in wanting to discourage the Amazon algorithms and even the, air quotes, borrowing of light novel images. I get it. But honestly, aren't those images there to try and help sell the book? It's the hook, so to speak, to grab the reader's interest. I don't personally care about spoilers or even the illustrations that much. I honestly don't think they're terribly necessary, especially if they're just over-the-top fan service. But I can appreciate the work that has gone into them, especially if it helps to identify and flesh out characters or settings. By placing the images at the back of the book, it is more likely a person will miss them entirely or only come to them after the fact, which is why I discovered I was angry. I felt cheated. That, hey, there are these images that may or may not have enhanced the enjoyment of the book, but because we don't want people stealing our images or Amazon to assume it's porn, we're gonna have to shove these pictures in the back. Like, I'm sorry, but isn't half the point of light novels, whether or not I agree with it, the illustrations, and people want and expect them? I don't know. I just know I really didn't like it at all, and that's probably the #1 flaw I can find with the book. Now, I'm probably about to say something controversial. Deep breath in. I strongly believe that the Apothecary Diaries should not get an anime adaptation. Don't get mad, just hear me out. The Apothecary Diaries is far too rich to be relegated to anime. It's far too intricate and detailed. It deserves better than anime. And honestly, if anyone from Netflix is smart and paying attention, option this, like now. Please don't send out the angry mob with knee-jerk reactions. Just think, if you have read the Apothecary Diaries, and if you haven't, you really should, just think about the prose. Think about the descriptions of everything, not just of what is going on in the world, but even of the textures of the fabric that are described, the carvings and the materials of the buildings and walls and courtyards. Think about the gardens and plants and ornaments. Think about the content matter and the dialogue. Think of the expressiveness in so many scenes that are without dialogue. Think about these emotions. Now, think realistically about how many anime studios could properly do justice to the wealth of information and details that are found in the Apothecary Diaries. Maybe Ghibli? Maybe Ufotable? I don't know. But truly and honestly, to give the Apothecary Diaries what it deserves and to reach a broader audience, I think the best way to go about it is straight to live action with a company that can afford to throw a lot of money and talent into a proper production. I adore live action adaptations, especially of Asian stories and period pieces. You can get so much more range of, well, everything from live action than you can from animation. Think of things like Mystic Pop-Up Bar, or Kingdom, or House of Flying Daggers, or The Untamed, or The Princess Wei Young. These are just titles off the top of my head, and there are so many more. I'm in no way discounting anime. There are loads of beautifully rendered anime that can be emotionally charged and even gut-wrenching. I love anime. I watch more than is probably healthy. But for this one title, please, the Apothecary Diaries deserve so much more than becoming mediocre fodder. Okay, now you guys can send out the hordes. I'm sorry. I would really like to take the opportunity to thank patron and Discord member RP Geist for their recommendation of the Apothecary Diaries. Yes, I had been interested in it while I saw it while I was editing Justus's release video, and it helped that so many people were saying how wonderful it was. Though what really cinched it for me was that RP Geist told me that Maomao was an amazing female lead and that much of the story had a mystery type element, and he thought I would enjoy it. Plus, that the writing was like through the roof, that it was unlike most light novels. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it immensely, so a big thank you. My next review will be coming from another Patreon patron recommendation. The weakest manga villainess wants her freedom. Yes, I know it's an isekai, and I just got through saying how much I dislike them. But, you know, what is life if it isn't about trying things out? So please stay tuned for that, coming as soon as I can get to reading it. Thanks everyone for joining me today. I hope you're staying safe and well. I do have some pretty good news. Cross your fingers, toes, hairs, everything. Justus will be joining us once again with new content as early as next week even. Until then, I've got more visual novel playthroughs on the go with the classic Katawa Shoujo and the remastered Perseverance Part 1, so please look forward to those coming shortly. In the meantime, thank you so much again for all your continued support, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!